Hello, my name is Craig Gellan. I'm going to give you a very quick introduction to the capabilities of OpenNMS to monitor a sophisticated website. I have a second video which goes into much more detail, but this video is very short and just gives you the idea of what can be achieved. So I'm going to look at the USPTO patent website, and I'm going to try and do a simulated search. So within this site we have the ability to do a patent search, and so I'm going to click through to the search page. Now within this page I know that this particular patent is going to return a NantHealth patent. We can see that's a NantHealth patent. So what I want to do is to simulate putting in this number and getting this result, because that will be testing the whole website including the backend database. Now unfortunately this site is not a simple site, it's implemented using JavaScript, so we need to be able to capture the actual requests that are being made and simulate those. So if I use the tools within Firefox and look at the network view, then I can make this search again, and we'll see that we have made a post using a request which is a JSON message. So this is the JSON message I need to send. So what I need to do is to set up OpenNMS so it can do a post to this particular URL using this particular request payload, and then I will look for the result in the response, which is also a JSON response of this number. So in OpenNMS I've set this up to do this, and I've done it on this particular node. So this node is just a dummy node, but it represents this website with its various IP addresses, and it's running on a minion in Europe. So basically what it's doing is that this minion is making ongoing requests to this website to test the availability of the services. And I have several services that I'm looking at. So this one here is the service that is going to make that requisition. So it's making that call using this particular JSON message, and it's expecting this response. And so we can see the site is 100% up and it's working fine. So that's one example of using OpenNMS to test a particular service on a website. The other example is using OpenNMS to do a trademark search. Now this is more complicated. So if I go back to the website again, and this time I'm going to look at trademark searches. In this case, the complication comes from the fact that if I just look at this link, we can see that the link itself, and hopefully you can see that, includes a state and a random number which corresponds to the session that this particular excuse me, website is associated with. So that session number is very important. We need to be able to extract that. So what we do is we basically find that URL, find the session number, and then we go to this particular page using that session number, and then we can make a request. So now I'm going to look for patents associated with OpenNMS, or trademarks with OpenNMS, and I'll do a submit query. And the JavaScript behind this page is sending out a request. Again, let me look at the network. It's done a lot of things, but it's basically sent out a request using this OpenNMS, and it's expecting back a serial number. So I'm going to look for that serial number. So in this case, if again I look at OpenNMS and look at this example, this is the page sequence that we're going through. We're basically going through and finding that state value and then including it in all subsequent requests, and then finally we're using that state value to log out from the session. That state value corresponds to the key for the session that the user has started up. So again, OpenNMS is going through this sequence repeatedly to actually test that website and get the result back that it's expecting. So the way I've set this up, at this point I'm actually using different nodes. So this node, as you can see, is running on the defaults, which is the core OpenNMS. This node is running on the Europe minion, and this node is running on the USA minion. And that's one way to set this up. You can basically repeat the service definition on each of those nodes, put those nodes in different minions, and then from the location where that minion is located, you will be testing the availability of your website using these service tests. That works, and it's one way of doing it. It's handy if you're using requisitions to set up how your OpenNMS is doing its polling. But we do have another capability in OpenNMS which allows us to look at applications. So here I've seen a definition of an application. I'm going to edit that definition, and we can see that what we're doing is we're choosing services that we've already defined, and we're choosing locations that we want to run that service against. Now you'll remember that I had defined a node against two of those minions. So those minions were scanning based on the node, but the minion Canada 1 didn't have any nodes assigned to it. So what's different in this case is what we're saying is we want to run these services that we've defined elsewhere, but we want to run them on these locations or on this particular minion. Okay, and that will allow us then to see from an application perspective what minions are getting the response they expect. Okay, go back to the applications view, and again, if we look at the application itself, this is the definition of the application, but we can also now look at the status of the application itself, and the status is showing us that these services are running on default, which is the core OpenNMS, and it's running on Minion Canada, and it's 100% in all cases. We can also see a topology view of that, where again we're looking at, these are the underlying services that make up the USPTO patent service, and everything's green, so everything's fine. So two ways of visualizing the scanning of sites, but the scanning of the sites itself is set up using a configuration that's pretty much the same in both cases. Essentially, if I go back to the example of USPTO trade search, we're doing a page sequence. Final thing I just wanted to say was you can do other things as well. So this web DNS search is actually, in this case, from the minion, it is looking for that URL. So it's doing a DNS lookup from the minion at whatever location it's at, and saying that at that location that URL is being resolved properly. So again, another test you can do against your website. And for websites, you might want to test a number of different things in terms of, are certificates correct? Is HTTPS coming back correctly? Are we able to go through a page sequence and get the results back we expect? And is DNS resolving correctly? And all of those capabilities are possible in OpenNMS. I'm not going to go through the configuration of how to set that up in this video, but I will point out finally the other possibility around Selenium IDE. So Selenium is a product an open source project which many organizations use to test their websites, and the Selenium IDE is a plugin which you can have for Firefox or for Chrome, and it essentially gives you a way to record what you're actually doing on a site. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to call it USPTO. And I'm going to give it the initial website that I wanted to go to. So USPTO website, let's go to this. Let's go back to my Selenium IDE. Put in uspto.gov, and I'm going to start recording. It opens up a new web page, and now everything I do on this web page is recorded. So I'm going to look at the patent public search. I'm going to do a basic search. I'm going to put in my number. I'm going to do the actual search for that, and I've got a result back. Okay, so that's been recorded. I'm going to stop the recording now, and I'm going to call this USPTO patent. So I have recorded that sequence of things I've done, and I can replay that, but I can also export this as a file. Now, OpenNMS was able to run these tests within its Selenium poller, but it ran them as JUnit tests. So I can export this test as a JUnit test. And you can see that if I just look at the download, this was the JUnit test that was exported, which basically is doing everything that are set up in those steps. And what OpenNMS did with a capability that it used to have, it actually ran these tests as Groovy scripts, and the result of the test would then be that the site was either up or down. So that was a Selenium monitor. Now, the Selenium monitor has been depreciated in OpenNMS because unfortunately the libraries that it used are incompatible with the libraries that OpenNMS now uses. So in order to reinstate or recreate this capability, we would need to do quite a lot of work in OpenNMS to allow the Selenium libraries to work alongside OpenNMS libraries, and that would be work to be done. I think it would be desirable to include this capability, but it's something that we'd need to include in our roadmap. It wouldn't be a trivial exercise. So, bottom line, OpenNMS today, out of the box, provides you with a lot of capabilities around monitoring. If you look on the documentation, you can see there's lots of different monitors. HTTPS, HTTP post, which I demonstrated, DNS resolution monitor, it's shown here, and the page sequence monitor, which is further down, is really what I've used. I have provided a basically a website that shows you how to use this for the example that I've shown you, and I've got a separate video that goes through that. That's the capabilities that OpenNMS has today, but if we introduce the Selenium IDE with the ability to capture websites, it would make it a lot easier to set up configurations for monitoring websites, but the basic capability would be the same. It just makes it easier to capture the things on the website you want, make sure the website's running, rather than having to go through the exercise that I went through in finding out how the website works and then making the right calls. So thank you for listening. Hopefully that is helping you to understand the capabilities in OpenNMS, and I will see you again.